Hi, continuing Iamblichus' Exhortation to Philosophy text, chapter 10, which is about arts and how the proof that philosophy is extremely useful for ordinary person can be found in arts. By arts, Iamblichus means professions, vocations, and so on. In the previous video, we talked about exemplars, and it took me a while to understand what Iamblichus means by the exemplars and kind of how he uses the other examples of a carpenter and a politician. I think if you read it, it could be very straightforward to you, but for some reason I just couldn't understand it. Yeah. So this is another video to explain it a little bit clearer in terms of a carpenter and a politician. So we have two arts, which Iamblichus mentions, carpentry and politics. So, and this is the process we can see from a couple of his paragraphs. So he says there are such things as exemplars, and by this I think he means natural laws. I'm not sure if he explicitly states that or not. Then we have things like arts, for example, carpentry and politics. He says, for an art to be good, it needs to use tools. For example, in carpentry, the tools are ruler, compass, plummet, and so forth. In politics, the tools of politics are standards, which are then turned into laws, and so on. And this person then uses those tools to do their job. So the tools, I drew it in this way, exemplars, art, tools, person, so that it's clear. But essentially, tools need to come from exemplars. So the tools come from the art. The art naturally has to come from exemplars in terms of the order of hierarchy. Because if we remember, the tools find their end. They serve the purpose of how they're born and why they're born is to serve art. Hence I wrote art above the tools. And art is an imitation of nature, as we see from other chapters that Iamblichus mentions. And nature is what Iamblichus refers to as exemplars. So exemplars, I didn't draw it here, but he gives some exemplars for carpentry. He gives, there are such things as light, and light, for example, light, rays, sun rays, I assume he means, and water. And those things, those laws and principles of nature, they are then, through the art of carpentry, they're turned into instruments, like the level that the carpenters use to see if everything is leveled, which has like an oil or a water inside of it, and other things. Sunlight they use in different ways and so forth. So that's turned into the tools. So we have to use nature's processes and laws to create those tools to do a good job. If we do not do that, if we just look at what's around us and try to create things out of how other people are doing it, we could do a good job or we might not. But if we do this, we could do an extraordinary job. And we see this not, as I mentioned before, we see this not in just carpentry and politics, but especially in things where a person is given a lot of creativity, like in authors, for example, authors, poets, singers, and so forth. When they try to connect to themselves, when they try to, when they study philosophy and so on, the work they produce is absolutely incredible. It is very wise. There's a lot of symbolism. It touches people on many different levels. Even in for example, in music where we don't really expect it. For example, one example sprung to mind is Tupac in rap. if we look at the books that the Tupac read, and Tupac was a sensation, his words touched a lot of people. And if we look at the books that he read, he was reading a lot of philosophy books. So naturally, his mind was getting higher and higher in terms of realizing sort of the nature of reality. And then he was bringing it down through rhymes and the music, and supporting the art of music and producing of rap music. Because he was such a sensation, the stuff he was giving was new. More or less, it was quite original. So of course he had to come from higher up. If he was just copying what everyone else was doing, he'd just be like everyone else. So we see this very often in art. This is not what Iamblichus is saying, this is just my speculations right now. We see this very often in art. A huge progress is made by an artist, and by artist I mean it could be a businessman, it could be anyone. A politician, a carpenter, or a painter, a musician, so forth. Huge progress is made by a person that revolutionizes the art. And very often, if we study that person, we see that their mind was constantly, they were studying philosophy. Like if you study any great, mathematicians or anyone, any other art, you will see this. And this makes sense. Why? Because they were drawing from the exemplars, higher ideas and concepts, natural laws. So that's it. I'm going to do a couple of minutes of meditation now. You're welcome to join. And then I'll see you in my next video.